right, anyway. What are we going to talk about next? I'll tell you what we're going to talk about. Monday Night Raw. And I got to be honest with you, Brian. I misled you here because I said, okay, I read the recap online of the show, and really I'm going to watch. When I get time to skip through and see the Bloodline business, their interviews and whatever fucking happens. That sounded like that was really the gist of it, right? But as I started watching, or not watching, but observing this program, it was like with AEW this week, I don't almost know what to say. They're doing a lot of this shit on purpose, but it was like a car wreck or giraffes fucking. I couldn't look away. I was morbidly drawn to a lot of this program and just... let's talk about it for a second, shall we?
No.
Well, I will, and you just sit back.
I didn't watch Raw. And I even asked you, should I go back and watch Raw? Do you want to talk about it? You said, nah.
I know. I misled you. I've already admitted to that. But I'm going to tell you what you missed. The whole thing, the reason why I wanted to watch it was just, again, because of the Bloodline. I heard Heyman is on, Roman Reigns is on, and blah, blah, blah. We'll see how this is going to develop, right? And Heyman was in the back and opened up Raw, introduced himself and Roman Reigns, and Reigns cut a fucking heck of a promo on Kevin Owens and him going to get John Cena. And basically he's laying down the premise, well, we're going to start interfering in Kevin Owens' business because he's interfering in ours, and we're also going to make sure that everybody knows we run the place, right? He comes off as a big deal. He's a great, serious promo with feeling, right? They immediately, to make this point, they cut out of that to the Usos and Solo in the back of the arena, whatever arena they were in, beating up one of the underneath guys, and a bunch of people standing around going, oh, stop. And that, it made it phony. It killed it. For their star comes off as a star and makes a statement, and the very next thing you see is what we see on all these wrestling programs. How many people have gotten beaten up backstage on a wrestling show just in the last year? How many hundred?
Well, I don't know, a lot.
And it doesn't ever look good, and it always looks phony, and it's going to be a theme. It's going to be a theme, let's say. So the first match was the Street Profits against Judgment Day. And the Street Profits had, I forget his first name, but Tozawa. I think he lost his first name a while back. Tozawa was in their corner because Judgment Day, not a Balor and Priest, have Rhea and Dominic. So that's the first match. Boy, howdy. I love the Judgment Day, but again, there's nobody interesting they've worked with yet. To me, it's the same fucking... 6 people. But Tozawa ends up throwing a drink in Dominic Mysterio's face, and that distracts Finn Balor, and one of the Street Profits rolled Balor up and beat him. So now they're beating the Judgment Day already. But we said they would never have an, what's the time? I started saying interracial match, an intergender match in WWE, and they just had one. And now I know why they don't need to have any more. Rhea Ripley comes down the aisle and confronts Tozawa and just hauls off and nails him with the best right-handed punch that I've seen from any guy in 6 months. Just clocked him. Bam. Looked great. But then she challenged him to a fight. And here's the thing. And yes, he's 6 inches shorter than she is and 50 pounds lighter than he is to begin with, or than she is. And I don't recall watching Tozawa wrestle, but I can't believe there's anybody smaller on the roster in the WWE. But they had a match where Tozawa couldn't hit Rhea Ripley. He could like Hurricane Rana her, use momentum, you know what I'm saying, a throw or something like that, but he couldn't actually strike. But meanwhile, she could kick the shit out of him. And because of the size difference, it looked like she was beating up a Boy Scout. But it went so long because they were trying to do the contrived things where some way or another he would get a hope spot but still not being able to strike her or slam her or whatever. So at one point she tried to give him one and he jumped up on the turnbuckles and slipped off the fucking ropes. And she tried to give him a pop-up power bomb at one point, and he jumped right over the top of her and fell face first over on the other side. Can you see this? She's going for the pop-up power bomb. As she got under his legs, he kept going up in the air. I guess she threw him so far, he was so little, he went right over her fucking head. Boom, crashed and burned. So then she tried to immediately snatch him back up for a power bomb, but now she's rushing. Both of their timing got off, and he just hung upside down because he couldn't sit all the way up. And then she held him and powered him up, and that's where the Hurricane Rana came. They were all going through all that trying to do a Hurricane Rana, and she rolled out to the floor. She was laying flat on the concrete floor, Brian, and guess what Tozawa did? He ran to hit the ropes on the far side of the ring like he was going to run back across and dive on a person laying flat on the concrete. But he turns around and hits the ropes on the far side, and Balor trips him. And then here come the Street Profits, and they do a dive on Balor and Priest. And Tozawa's comeback was basically he just kept dodging her and hitting Dominic, and then missed a splash off the top, and Rhea Ripley hit her finish 1, 2, 3. We were 30 minutes into the show at this point. And then they go to the back, and more people are laying there, and there's agents and security and staff. More people have been attacked in the back by the Bloodline. And as much as we want to see what's going to go on, they're trying to make it less interesting because it's fucking phony. So then the next matchup was I exercised the Alpha Academy rule. Gable and Otis against Gallows and Anderson with AJ in the corner. Am I saying the same 12 names on this 3-hour program that we see every week?
Is there anyone that would tune in to see that match?
I can't imagine.
Gallows and Anderson versus Otis and Gable.
The people who are fans of Shush. So anyway, then here's the thing. It's basically you're watching this 3 hours for the afterbirth on a couple of matches and a couple of promos. Get that match out of the way. The Usos and Sammy hit the ring and jump Gallows and Anderson and AJ and lay them out in like 30 seconds. Just hit them with a bunch of finishes. And here comes Adam Pearce and Hurricane Helms, Shane Helms down there. And security are trying to get them to leave. They've got like 6 or 8 indie guys dressed as security standing there with their mouths agape. And they're standing there pleading with the heels to leave while the heels, all 3 of them, instead of these 10 or 12 guys, do the promo in the ring, and then the heels leave. But as they're on the way out, AJ has recovered and jumped them in the entryway, and they did a pull apart. But Gallows and Anderson, once they got laid out, they disappeared. We never saw them again. And they were laid out in the ring that the heels ended up doing the interview in. So somehow they just rolled out and were deposited somewhere or possibly, teleported to another dimension. We're an hour into the show. They did a sit down with Alexa Bliss and Bianca, where the material was as putrid as the delivery. Bianca Belair has some oomph, but Alexa Bliss, again, she was talking about all the dark times that she had or whatever, and then they've contrived some goddamn beef between these two, and Bianca stands up to leave, and Alexa picks up a vase of flowers and breaks it over the back of her head. And down she goes, and the announcer says, "Well, we need some help." God. That brain damaged this woman. This giant glass vase, if it was really real, would have pulverized her skull. All right. So then, you know what the next 20 minutes of the show was?
No.
A ladder match between The Miz and Dexter Lumis. And they start out with a dozen ladders set up all around the ringside. And within seconds, one of them was already in play. And I thought, it's The Miz, it's a ladder match, and it's going to be way too fucking long. So I'm skipping it. And I was right on all counts. However, at some point, because I had the visual speed search, Dexter Lumis did a leg drop off the top of one of the ladders outside onto the announce desk, and Miz moved and the desk blew into a million pieces. And that wasn't even the finish. They still just got up and kept going. So after about 20 minutes, that's where Bronson Reed came in. And that's one of the big news stories of the week, is Bronson Reed is another guy that's back as a result of Triple H's, talent rehabilitation program. And we talked about it on the Drive-Thru. We hadn't seen the clip at the time, but some of the fans on the internet were complaining, how can he leave a top spot in New Japan? He was going to have a great run. The answer is for like 5 times the amount of money. But obviously, Triple H sees something in him. And that can't be a bad sign, even though he's, being involved with The Miz. We talked about it when he was in NXT. He looks great. His shit looks good for a guy. He Bam Bam Bigelow-ish in that he is limber and light on his feet, but his splash off the top looks good and firm, all that stuff. But basically, the problem was, again, the finish. I don't know who does these fucking finishes, if it's the writers and then the agents or producers just have to bear up under these parameters. But yes, we know that a ladder match is no DQ, lazy booking. But the finish was, Lumis has dispatched The Miz. He's down. And Lumis is on top of the ladder, and he's about to get the money they've hung, when all of a sudden Bronson Reed comes in the ring and just in front of the referee and everybody pulls Lumis off the ladder and beats him up, and came off the top rope with a great big splash on him. It looked like $1 million. And then Bronson Reed sets the ladder up and then pulls The Miz back to his feet, helps him climb the ladder to get them all in full view. It's the wrong kind of heat. Yes, the returning heel should hit the ring and do something or make some kind of impact in hopefully a quick and decisive fashion to lead to the other heel winning. But it shouldn't be so long and egregiously in front of the referee to where everybody's sitting there that's not scribbling notes for their, the report on their Wrestling Insider podcast, which that means if there's 10,000 people in a building, there's 7 people that are not doing that. They're just sitting there going, well, this is bullshit because the referee's looking right at it. And that's why there's an art to finishes where things can happen and things you can get in and get out while the referee is distracted, or you make things plausible. You don't just come up with the idea of this is what I want to do and do it and ignore everything about the scene that's going on all around you. So I'm glad he's back. I think he's a good talent, and I think they can get a lot out of him. I wish it hadn't been the wrong kind of heat and a rotten finish that could have been polished up to where it didn't have to be so hokey at the end where The Miz is so unconscious that he's even got to fucking help push him up the ladder. And a lot of people to take up for that finish will say, well, that's The Miz's gimmick. He's supposed to be so ineffectual and whatever. Well, then figure out what something to do with the referee. Don't let him sit there and watch the whole goddamn thing. Anyway, that's what I thought about that, the Bronson Reed return. But I think he'll be better off than he would have been in New Japan, even if his matches aren't as many stars. And speaking of stars, AJ Styles, who has had the shit kicked out of him earlier. I guess that's why he got to make the little comeback. Because they said, well, we can't fucking leave him laying. He's got to wrestle later on. So he got one fucking dash in the pull apart. But AJ Styles has a single match with Sami Zayn. And I'm thinking, oh, both those guys are good. And I've got to see what the fuck goes on. And I guess it came to me a few minutes in that, again, on AEW television, these same two guys, this would be a great fucking match and the people would love it. But even though they started fast, it was back and forth. There was nothing wrong with the work. The people didn't really seem to care about the match because they just see this endless parade of non-advertised cold matches over and over on Raw, or, between the same people that wrestle each other every week in some, a combination or another. But also this one, AJ allegedly is supposed to be the babyface because Sammy's part of the bloodline and that's the top heel group, but the people love Sammy and they were rooting for the heel over the babyface and wanting to see him win, to the point where when he hit his brain buster, and again, a great one. Even El Generico had a good brain buster. That was one of his best things. He got a 2 count. The fans were upset when the babyface kicked out. And then AJ gets a comeback, and they don't really want to boo him, but he doesn't get a response much on the comeback because they don't want to cheer him beating up the heel. And then Solo appears at ringside, and AJ gets on him, and then goes back to Sammy and chucks Sammy in the ring, and he's going to go in after him, and Solo comes from behind, and they said the Samoan spike. It was very quick. It wasn't particularly visual or impressive, but he hit him with something in the neck, and then Sammy hit his finish. Boom, 1, 2, 3. 2 hours into the show, Brian, at this point. And then here came Seth freaking Franklin Rollins in Liberace's pajamas. And Seth is a babyface again, and they were in Iowa, and that's his home state. And he's out there doing a promo telling Roman Reigns that Mondays don't belong to you, they belong to me, Monday Night Rollins, when Theory's music interrupted. And he actually has a ton of heat these days. The people seem to really be offended by his presence. And he can talk, and we've mentioned, none of us have any idea what Seth Rollins' gimmick really is, but, the dancing and the prancing and the laughing. But then I figured out what was wrong with this. If this was AEW again, or any other wrestling program since the dawn of time, these guys could probably have a fairly nice argument with each other because they're both fairly glib these days. Seth Rollins came out of his shell. Theory's got some attitude. But all we get is the WWE thing, and you'll know what I'm talking about, where they just stand there in the middle of the ring and trade scripted comments and laugh and make faces at the witticism of the other. Oh, that's a good one there. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah.
It's because the writers write these scenes rather than two grown adult men having an argument or a disagreement or just busting each other's balls, all of which happens at one point or another in the world of sports. They're doing a scene where they make witty remarks and they react with a chuckle or of an expression to the witty remark that was made and then come back and play on that. They're playing parts and they're reading lines and nobody's mad and you don't care. And then after about 5 minutes of this, Seth, all of a sudden, he started yelling. So now you know he's serious because now he's yelling. And he made the challenge for a match right now. Rollins and Theory. And suddenly, the Usos show up at ringside. And Seth says, well, we've got company. We'll deal with this later. So the guy he's been talking to and just challenged for the past 5 minutes because the Samoans show up in ringside. Well, okay, we'll deal with this later. Well, and the Usos climb in. And, of course, Theory, being a heel, bails on Seth. And the Usos jump Seth. And the heat did not look real great. Just, a lot of weak kicks is what they're doing, all of them these days. And then music plays, and here comes Kevin Owens. And he attacks the Usos, and Seth gets back up. And they nail the Usos to the floor. And, okay, there's some excitement. By the time the Usos have backed up and stood up from taking their bumps out, both Rollins and Owens have microphones in their hands. This show is 3 hours fucking long. Instead of giving these matches 25 minutes sometimes, take an extra 30 seconds to stalk around the ring, get pissed off, and yell and scream for the ring announcer to give you a microphone. It's just so pre-planned. Now they challenge the Usos for a tag team match that will happen apparently later on in the program. Okay, great. So now Owens and Rollins, that have had a rivalry in a program earlier this year and several matches, they're going to team up against the Usos. So we got a story to keep us to the end of the show.
Oh yeah, that'll do the trick.
Well, at least they're trying. And then I got to admit it was getting late and getting long. Bayley wrestled Becky Lynch in a single match. And I used to like Bayley before she got the two job girls with her, and Becky Lynch is a star. But at this point, I wrote, I can't wait for this show to be over, and I'm getting to the bloodline. And then the next thing I see is Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins in the back of the arena in front of some folded up chairs getting ready for the match. Now, what would you think they'd be doing in a situation like this, Brian?
In a situation to get ready for the match, or in a situation in the back with a couple of chairs?
Well, I'm just saying they're standing in front of several folded up chairs. They're in the back of the arena. They're taping wrists. But this is their time where they're going to get ready. They're going to team up after this rivalry and fight these two guys that just jumped them. And you would think that the interview from one or both's part would be, look, I know we've had tons of issues with each other. I actually hate your fucking guts. I can't stand you. But tonight, if we don't work together, these guys are going to fuck us up. So we've got to make this count. But I promise you, I got eyes in the back of my head. And if you try to stab me in the back when the odds are against me or the chips are down or whatever, I will live to see you pay for it. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
No, they were laughing and joking about the feud they had earlier in the year and making jokes about, well, I think you hit me with the chair, didn't you? Or whatever the fuck. And it was Abbott and Costello. They were laughing at each other and reacting about the smart aleck or cute little comments they were making about what they were supposed to be serious about earlier in the year was hating each other. So the whole idea of teaming two guys that have been in a big personal issue up is that you want to see these two guys fight the other two guys, but you also want to see if somebody's going to stab the other guy in the back or if there's going to be some issue. Well, now they were just laughing and joking. It was just jokes about the whole thing. So I wrote, if they don't care, I don't care. So I'll save some more time. I'll skip the fucking match and get to the finish. And that's what I did. Because again, if they don't care, I don't care. But listen to this finish, because this, God damn it, I'm telling you, they're not even making an effort anymore. It's just like a musical variety show where they just bring acts out on the stage. It's not one cohesive match. It's a series of spots and stunts. So at the finish, Rollins comes off the top rope, hits both the Usos with a double cross body, and goes down, and Jay rolls to the floor, and Rollins follows him, right? Jay has just been hit with a double cross body, him and his brother, which they fell down and rolled out on the floor. He's on his feet. Jay hits Seth Rollins coming off the stairs to jump on him with a super kick, and Rollins goes down. And then Jay just sits down by the announcer's desk and stays there. He's not selling anything. In the ring, Owens hits a splash off the top rope on Jimmy Uso. Looked great. Cover, 1-2, kick out. Jay didn't try to save. Jay is sitting at the announce desk at ringside. Owens then goes up the top and goes for a senton off the top. Jimmy raises his knees. Owens sells. Jay is still sitting by the desk. I made it a point to keep my eye on one of these guys when he does his disappearing act. After Owens got the raised knees on the senton, they did 3 replays of the 3 previous moves, and there's still been no sign of Jay or Seth. Now, Seth is still selling a super kick. Was the super kick with a loaded boot? Meanwhile, again, Jay is still down at ringside, not coming into the match. So Owens and Jimmy sell forever, while the referee tells both of them something. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on and who's waiting on what. And finally, it comes to us in the form of Solo climbing over the barricade. Apparently, they were supposed to sell down until he got there, and they're telling the referee on the IFB, tell him stay down. Solo's in fucking section D or whatever the fuck. So finally, Solo climbs over the barricade. And at this point, Jay and Seth have both been down at ringside for over 2 minutes. Seth selling a super kick and Jay sitting down next to the desk after he super kicked. So suddenly, here comes Gallows and Anderson, and they jump Solo at ringside. Remember, they got the shit kicked out of them a while back. Well, they waited till now to get even. And it's 2 baby faces on 1 heel at ringside. Now Jey Uso suddenly dives back into the ring, runs across the ring, and dives over the top rope onto all 3 of them on the floor. Suddenly Seth is back up fresh as a daisy and dives straight. He does the deal where he does the dive straight over the top, but he flips and like cannonballs them. He went straight over the top of Solo and Jey Uso. Straight over the top of them and perfectly rolled off their backs to the floor. And they both looked around and like, shit, and they fell anyway. And like they were shot. And then he posted Solo and curb stomped Jay. And now I'm thinking, where's Jimmy and Owens? Oh, they're still fighting in the ring. Well, guess who came from ringside? Austin Theory comes from the crowd side of the rail and whacks Seth Rollins over the back of the head with the U.S. belt. And now he's down, and Jimmy and Owens are still fighting in the ring, doing spots back and forth. So they're keeping the match going after we've had a tag team attack a guy that was trying to interfere in the match, and then another guy come out behind the referee's back and whack the guy over the head with the belt and all this stuff. And now they're doing spots in the ring, Owens and Jimmy. After all this is settled down, and finally Owens hits a pop-up powerbomb. 1, 2, 3. After all that, we got a clean finish. So at this point, remember I was keeping track of everybody. Now Rollins has been down again from getting whacked with that U.S. belt, right? Owens gets the win. They play his music. He goes up to the turnbuckle. He gets the beauty shot with the camera. People are cheering him. What would you do if you just won a tag team match?
Lift my hands in the air and celebrate? I don't know.
No, you'd look around to see if your partner realizes that y'all just won. He never once looked around. He shouldn't have seen what happened to Rollins because that was a sneak attack by the heel. But he gets up, he raises his hands, he goes to the buckle, he's accepting the cheers. Never once has he bothered to look over. They even get a camera shot from Rollins' point of view. He's laying on the floor, and Owens is in the ring, not even goddamn, where'd the fuck Seth go? And then finally, and then as he's standing in the ring, here comes Sami Zayn. He hits the ring. They have a face-off. Owens starts taking his wrist tape off. Sami gets out of the ring and goes and helps the Usos up, and they walk off. So people are appearing and disappearing and staying, and this beat everything. That Jey Uso super kicks a guy, and in plain view of however many thousand people were in that building, just sat down by the announce desk and took 2 minutes out of the match like he was in a penalty box. With shit going on that if he was trying to win, he would have been a part of, trying to keep the guy from beating his brother. There you go. That was Raw.
There you go. I'm glad I didn't watch.
I couldn't look away from some of this. I really couldn't, because it's not that hard to figure finishes if you have guys that can execute them. This seemed to be executed about like it was called, except maybe for Solo being a little late. It took a left turn at Albuquerque, but they cross all the angles up and you can't remember, or they do shit in front of the referee, or they just, again, that's becoming my new version of Vince McMahon's belt or strap or whatever that he hates, is guys just in full view of the arena, just taking time out of the match because it's not time for them to be involved. I think that would probably make me turn to violence quicker than anything in modern wrestling if I was there to see it in person.